Kyle Klingman with Track Wrestling. Guess where we get to go? New York City. Scott Beck is our boots on the ground, talking Vladimer Khinchegashvili. We have Frank Chamizo. You have your daughter, Michaela Beck, who is now out in Tempe, Arizona. You're the second biggest Bob Dylan fan behind me. Scott, great talking to you here, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Kyle. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You also went to Harvard, so we got to mention that. You wrestled for Harvard.
Yeah.
But really particularly interested in Vladimer Khinchegashvili being in New York City. You've had some interactions with him, and actually your daughter Michaela has had some interactions. She's been there, trained with him a little bit. But what's that been like having him there? How good is he? What do you see out of him that's different than the American style?
Okay, well, first of all, I think he's an exceptionally good wrestler. Obviously, his record speaks for itself. He's Olympic silver medalist, Olympic gold medalist, world gold, silver, bronze, and a 3-time European champ, something like that. So he's very credentialed. He just, first of all, he's a great guy. I'll just say that flat out. But he just wrestles a very loose style where he figures out what his opponents are doing, which is very different from almost any other wrestler I've ever seen, where a lot of wrestlers have a certain setup and tie that they look for. They're very consistent in that. And Michaela and I have watched a lot of film on him, and he really figures stuff out and goes with the flows and looks what's there, probes, sees, and adjusts very well. So that's it, and he's in New York on and off at the New York RTC, with, Kendall and Valentine. And he's very friendly with Valentine. And, we were fortunate enough to be able to get some work with him, and I've been fortunate enough to watch him practice, which is pretty fun.
When you see that style and you're able to see it next to the American style, what would you say is the difference between Europeans and the U.S.?
We're very fit. We're in great shape. Our technique's very good and explosive, but they're more relaxed and loose. And I think they go from loose to explode and then back to loose. So there's more of an up and down tempo to the wrestling as opposed to go, go, go. Ideally, the perfect wrestler is a mix, I think, and I would say their faults are at times they're not in the best shape ever, and they can gas out, and that we're pretty good about being fit and tough in this country. But it is a very different style, and to me, it's like watching really, I hope I don't get in trouble saying it, but it's like watching ballet. It's just watching beautiful action as opposed to just physical action.
Is John Smith that perfect blend then?
John Smith's pretty damn good. He wrestled differently because he does it more more from the outside than from ties, where these guys will do that looseness from ties a lot, like a Satiev or, other Russians. But yeah, John Smith is pretty good. There aren't many like him, right? Big fan of John Smith.
As far as Khinchegashvili is concerned, do you get the feeling that he's excited about this opportunity and doing these events?
Yeah, he really is. Listen, most of these guys like being in the United States. For all the faults this country has and the divisiveness and things we're going through politically, this is the greatest country in the world. I will flat out say that. And I think these guys like it, whether it's a Frank Chamizo being here or Khinchegashvili. These guys like New York. They like being in the U.S. And, Khinchegashvili was traveling, and, we'd had to work out with Rustan Ampar, Russian Urigan champ. He was in Washington, state of Washington, hiking before he came back. So these guys love being here, and they love this country. But they go back and forth. Like Khinchegashvili owns a hotel in Georgia, and he has interest there. But they're really, I think, this opportunity for some of these like matches and matchups they enjoy. And I also like about him, he's very content to wrestle anybody. I don't think it's an ego thing. The guy takes losses. He's going through a situation where, his Olympic title was at 57. Went up to 61, was a world medalist. 65 is a little tougher. He's just a little small. And I was talking to, Valentine, and, we're saying, does the guy have a weakness? If his weakness is probably he's a little small for 65,
As it relates to the women's wrestling card, you are the guy that's up through the middle of the night watching all the women's wrestling matches, and your daughter
Crazy.
made a junior world team. You're fanatical about this. Is it because you have a daughter that wrestles, or do you think you would have caught the bug anyway?
I think a little of both. I think, I've because I have a daughter that wrestles, I started following it. And it's a good product. Flat out, if you watched, somebody's probably going to get mad at me, but if you probably watched women's world championships in New York in 2003, that product's very different than it is now. The sport's just evolved. It's evolved quickly, and I think it's a good product. But absolutely, I've become, definitely a fan of it. I'm pretty close with Terry Steiner, and Clarissa Chun, Emma Randall, Jackie Davis, Kira Barry. So just being involved in it, knowing the players, Lee Miracle, the coaches, Mark Perry, Frank Molinaro's working with my daughter. I mean, but most importantly, actually, getting to know the women and the young women, and they're tremendous, and they work really hard, and they want to be good. So there's good stories and good people, and I think the product's good.
When you see this Hawkeye Wrestling Club Showdown Open card on November 1, and you have 2 women's matches, do you feel like that's enough? Is that the right step to set a precedent?
I think it is for now. I think it's great they're doing that. I mean, obviously, at some point you want to get it to be equal, but there's economics to it, and there's also, what percent. Right now, there are no women, I believe, fully training at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. So the fact that they're even having 2 matches, with the women having left, I think is great. And I think they've been supportive of women's wrestling, and I think it's good that they're doing that. Over time, give the women a stage, let them perform, let the fans of the women watch, let the people that complain about not enough equality in terms of coverage, then let them click. I mean, we've talked about this, Kyle. Let them click on the live streaming for events, on the articles. I mean, this is measurable. There's metrics on this stuff. If we want media, whether it's Track Wrestling, Flow, we want media to promote the product, then the fans have to support the product. They have to.
Take us through your role as a father here. So you have a daughter, Michaela, that's absolutely fanatical about the sport. You have another daughter who doesn't even like wrestling. How do you balance that? How do you push right in the right direction and get them to appreciate it at some level?
I think you have to find with children, you have to find what they care about, right? Either you're in or you're out. So, Michaela's into sports. I happen to love sports, and I love wrestling, and she picked it up after, doing Taekwondo. So we connected about that. My other daughter had other interests, and I try to connect with that. I mean, right now she's started her own little business as a digital kind of media assistant. She's doing great with that, and just building up her own business. It's phenomenal. And, it's easy to want to be biased, to the wrestling because I love that, but you have to, figure out ways to connect. And the wrestling's really easy, but now the challenge is to figure out what your role is as your kid gets better, and it's about them. It's not about you. And as a parent, how much should you be involved? How much do you talk to the coaches? What do you say? What don't you say? How often do you go? How often do you watch practice? What questions do you ask? These are not simple things. And, there are times where you'd say, you need to support, then times maybe Terry Brands would say, I've gone over the line sometimes to some of the interest, So it's a fine line because you want them to, it's got to ultimately, wrestling's an alone sport. It's got to be on them, but they also need support. So it's an interesting process, and I'm still trying to learn and figure it out.
What's the wrestling vibe in New York City? This is the biggest city in the United States. Do you feel like there's a wrestling culture in the city?
I think there is, but it sometimes gets buried within the city, but I think there is. I mean, if you look at the history, obviously, of the New York Athletic Club, Sonny Greeno and Chick Morano, Rocky Aoki. I mean, there's a history. There's an event that's been there for a long time. It's been a staple. That wrestling room, legends have been in that wrestling room. In Long Island is very strong wrestling. And in terms of young youth wrestling, it Beat the Streets. We're trying to grow that and develop young men and women. I'm no longer on the board of Beat the Streets, but I'm still, I care a lot about it. And I'm in contact with Beat the Streets people a lot. And, the high school wrestling has improved a lot. We did fairly well at the state tournament, but there is an embedded culture. A lot of people that maybe aren't even from New York City that lived and worked, and this is pre-COVID stuff because right now everything's kind of in disarray, but there's a lot of former wrestlers that worked in Manhattan that want to support wrestling and care about wrestling. And you see that when we've had events, whether it's Beat the Street events, especially, we set up some high school matches where you bring the best kids from Jersey or Long Island, and the fans came, which is amazing. And then you see that at, when we had the NCAAs here at the Garden, I think it was pretty supportive. So, is it as embedded in the culture of Iowa? I mean, there's no place for wrestling like Iowa City, Iowa, in my opinion. It's just, it is wrestling, and I love that. And the wrestlers are rock stars there,
Take the 2016 NCAA championship. So I'll just relate an experience that happened to me. That I had a couple people pull me to the side and say, hey, what's going on here? And you had to explain the NCAA wrestling championships were going on. They had no clue. Do you feel like events like that and Beat the Streets events, do you think that actually embeds into the culture just a little bit and makes a dent for the sport?
I think it does. And I think people want to, people are curious. Listen, when we've had Beat the Streets matches out in Times Square and we have it up on the big screens, people want to stop and say, hey, what's going on here? And it can be annoying for guys like you or me, maybe, to sometimes have to start from ground zero. But if you say, hey, it's a wrestling, matches for a charity, or we have an NCAA tournament, I think people want to care. And it does create, hey, wrestling's alive and well, and there's a bunch of lunatics here watching it, so people, I think it is good, and people do it. And I do think MMA has created an awareness of wrestling, with people that may not have been touched by this, and we also have a vibrant combat sports, Renzo Gracie, there's many Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms, but especially we've trained it, use the space in Renzo Gracie's, and they've been very supportive and like wrestling a lot.
As far as the women's wrestling and how we continue to see it grow, what do you think the next steps are to get us to the point where that's really vibrant and thriving?
Okay, I think, first of all, I think what we're doing at the high school level is phenomenal. Sally Roberts wrestled like a girl. The number of states that have jumped, I mean, you guys have written about it. You guys are very supportive of it. It's amazing. And I think a great job with Salata, Sally Roberts, the Jackie Davises, the support of the people involved in this is amazing. So you need it at the high school level. And then at the college level, it's growing pretty quickly right now. I think ultimately we do need to be, and this isn't to belittle any smaller colleges, we do need to move into the Division I marquee names, but I think that's going to happen. And we got the approval, the emerging sports status. Now, what the timing on it is now with COVID, and you have trimming of athletic budgets, it's good. Maybe the process is going to take longer now, but I think methodically now it needs to jump to the more mainstream, bigger colleges as well. And, but it's incumbent upon us to fill those slots, right? We don't want to, I think, there is if we build it, they will come kind of vibe, but I also think it would be a shame to overbuild it and be forfeiting in certain programs and have things like that. So I think it's really important that we now move methodically. And I think Mike Moyer, has good game plans and stuff like that. And I've had conversations with him about it a little bit. And I think the people that are really taking this by the horn kind of know what they're doing.
How about blended wrestling? It's in New York City where you have half men, half women. Do you think that's a format that can work?
I think it's fun, actually. I think it's good bonding. I think it's a format that works at the high school level. I'm not sure if, I don't think the college men would go for it. I think in high school it can be fun. And really fun. When men wrestle men, women wrestle women, but they're on the same team and you alternate weights or something to do me. And I think it's been successful. I think the fans like it. I like at these events, even when we mix the men and women. I think it's good at the World Championships too, when they have them wrestling on different mats. And, some people don't like it, but I like when Greco's blended in as well, to tell you the truth, like it, in the bigger events.
We continue to wonder about this, but why hasn't the international form of wrestling taken off and these post-collegiate stars? Why aren't they the stars they should be, comparable to their college wrestling counterparts?
I think there's just an embedded old schoolness to this where people grew up with folk stars. I think we'll never switch, by the way, no matter what people say. I think because, number one, the product works and there's a lot of support. And I think if you look at, there's just a lot of junior high school and high school coaches that have never wrestled freestyle that probably aren't fans. And then those are the people that are going to watch, the NCAA tournament or the dual meets in colleges. And they should be. They're the same people and they're insanely good. The level, as good as college is, you and I have watched many times where multiple NCAA champs, get their butt handed to them when they first start wrestling seniors, and these guys are rock stars, in my opinion, and supermen and women. But it's just comfort. We're just comfortable with that product. And people that don't know international, which to me is a far better product. But the only thing somebody said recently is, you got in a bar fight, it's probably better to also know folk style to control somebody,
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Now, as it goes to the Hawkeye Wrestling Club Showdown Open, is there a match that stands out to you that you are excited about?
You know, there's a lot of good matches. I think the camera matchup should be pretty good. Also, yeah, you know, it'll be interesting to see Ironman Khinchegashvili just because, you know, on paper, Khinchegashvili should annihilate him, but Ironman's dangerous and dangerous people are dangerous, you know. So that'll be interesting to me. And Ironman looked pretty good, you know, in the Open. I think overall, I think it's a pretty solid card, top to bottom. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad they're doing it.